When Craig, an employee of an animal sanctuary, discovered a beautiful, majestic deer dead on the road, he was devastated. But what happened next shook him to his very core and left him speechless and feeling as if a miracle had just occurred. The employee worked at the Hillside Animal Sanctuary near Norwich in the UK, and he specialized in helping horses and cows that have suffered from improper farm care. Their cause was a worthy one, and over the years they had rescued and rehabilitated countless animals. Hillside Animal Sanctuary was founded in 1995 by an animal lover named Wendy Valentine. She had one goal: to help and campaign for animals in need, and most importantly, to bring public awareness to the millions of animals suffering every day in the intensive factory farming industry. In fact, it's currently home to around 4,000 horses, ponies, and donkeys, with many of the residents having been rescued from the farming industry. The sanctuary also employed a large number of people, including animal enthusiast Craig. He had always had a passion for horses and loved to be around them. He had grown up in a family that rode horses competitively and had inherited a passion for animals of the equine variety. His mother used to own 3 horses, and his 2 sisters used to take part in show jumping and dressage competitions. So when a job vacancy opened up at the Hillside Animal Sanctuary, Craig leapt at the chance. But from the moment he walked through the door, it was clearly evident how passionate he was about the job, and so he was hired on the spot. Much to his delight, from treating the animals' ailments, to grooming and checking on them, to feeding and watering them, to cleaning up after their droppings, Craig counted his blessings every single day. He felt lucky to be part of something so special and worthwhile. He enjoyed the challenges that each day would bring because he knew how rewarding his job felt to him. For example, one day, an old farm cow had been brought in. It was skinny and its bones were showing. It really didn't look in good health. It had been living on a farm since it was born, and it was suffering. Craig helped nurse the cow back to health and checked up on it every single day to ensure that it was happy and healthy. He even sat and talked to it and stroked its head as he worked on his laptop during the long nights when it didn't look like she would make it. Thanks to Craig's love and compassion, the cow survived and lived several more happy years in peace, tranquility, and comfort. One early evening after a particularly long shift, Craig was driving home. It was that time of year when the daylight stayed longer and it got darker later. He drove steadily and carefully down the winding country lanes that led from the sanctuary to the nearby village where he lived. But he noticed something up ahead, something lying on the road. At first he thought that maybe it was some trash that had been dumped, or perhaps the bumper had fallen off of a car. But as he slowly drove closer, his eyes went wide and he let out a small yelp of shock. What was lying in the road stunned him and left him with tears in his eyes. He put on his hazard lights and pulled to a stop and slowly got out of the car, approaching the road blockage with caution. He wiped away his tears as his suspicions were confirmed. In the middle of the road laid a large deer. It was clearly dead, though, as Craig placed a hand on its head. It was still semi-warm. Clearly, it had died very recently. It must have been struck by a car, as they often sped up and down these winding country roads in broad daylight or in the dark of night. Cars continuously were speeding down this road. Craig prayed that the death had been instant for the poor deer and that it had not suffered or been in any pain. Mercifully, if it was a high-speed impact, it would have all been over very quickly. Unfortunately, thousands of deer and other animals are killed by cars every year, especially at night when they're not as obvious and can frequently just appear out of nowhere. Animals are not able to comprehend the dangers of roads, so many times their first encounter with a speeding car is also their last. Many countries have tried to mitigate the issue, though. For example, they decided to paint deer's antlers in non-toxic fluorescent paint in Finland. This paint would pick up even the slightest hints of light and reflect it back at the driver, making them aware of the presence of an animal even if they couldn't see it properly in the dark. This really did help bring down the number of deaths that occurred. Sadly, though, things had not ended so well for the deer that Craig had encountered, even with the sun still up. This deer was just lucky. As with any death, this one was really sad. And he pulled out his cell phone and contacted authorities to come and help move the body. It couldn't remain on the road. Not only was it a danger to other drivers, but it was also disrespectful to the beautiful deer. But as Craig started to formulate a plan to move the giant body, he noticed something highly unusual. The deer was particularly large. It was a big and proud animal, and its antlers were substantial, but it also had an overly large and extended belly. Almost as if Craig placed his hands on the belly, and much to his surprise and astonishment, he felt movement, a twitch, or a hard kick that then repeated. He studied the dead deer's belly and was suddenly speechless. She was pregnant. But not only was she pregnant, she was in the final stages of the birthing process. It seemed as if the baby deer was ready to be born and welcomed into the world. It was nothing short of a miracle that the infant had survived. But now, Craig had to think fast and come up with a plan if he wanted the baby to live. Fortunately, Craig had medical equipment in his car as he was trained in the basics of veterinary medicine. He rushed and pulled out what items he needed. The sun was setting and it was getting dark. He positioned his car so that the deer was fully in the beam of the headlights. He then got to work, gently removing the fawn from the body of its dead mother. Eventually, the fawn was free, and Craig wrapped it in a blanket to place it in his car. As authorities arrived to deal with the dead mother, Craig turned his car around and headed back to the sanctuary, knowing that there'd be someone there who could help. The newborn fawn was quiet and looked around curiously. Well, it certainly was a startling welcome to the world. Unfortunately, despite its mother's size, the fawn was tiny and required immediate care and attention. As soon as it arrived at the sanctuary, they fed and ensured that it was eaten correctly before thoroughly checking it over. Luckily, everything seemed well, but the fawn was not out of the woods yet. It required 24-hour care, including healthy sleep and bottle feeding every 4 hours. It would have been a mountain of a task for anyone else, but Craig gladly volunteered. He had helped bring the deer into this world, so he felt responsible for the tiny animal. Thankfully, the fawn turned out to be strong and fought against all odds to survive. A fawn without its mother would more than likely die in the wild, but by some miracle, this one was discovered by Craig. Any other passersby might have just ignored the dead deer or not noticed she was pregnant. But still, thanks to Craig's veterinary training and passion for animals, he not only helped welcome the fawn into the world, but he also helped it survive and thrive. The poor, unfortunate fawn grew up to be one of the strongest animals at the Hillside Light Animal Sanctuary. It happily lived amongst the cows and horses that resided there and was one of the most beloved and active animals in the sanctuary. And it was all thanks to Craig, his quick thinking, and his desire to save and preserve life.